Today's story, The Fatal Handkerchief. We have also added this story to our playlist, where you can find all our channel stories at one place for your convenience. The opulent ballroom of the Hilton estate shimmered with wealth and grandeur. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the crowd of society's elite, who mingled with glasses of champagne in hand. The evening's main attraction, a rare diamond necklace, was poised on a pedestal under a spotlight, drawing admiring gasps from the assembled guests. The auctioneer, an affable man with a booming voice, began the final bidding, Detective Alex Reed, blending seamlessly among the high society with his tailored suit and calm demeanor. Watched with practiced attention. Though he was ostensibly a guest, he had been tipped off about potential illegal activity at this exclusive event. His presence here was as much about discretion as it was about vigilance. As the gavel was about to come down, signaling the end of the bidding, a piercing scream shattered the elegance of the evening. Heads turned in unison as a well-dressed woman, her face contorted in pain, collapsed to the floor. The room erupted into panic. Guests rushed forward, their once calm expressions now replaced with fear and confusion. Alex's instincts kicked in. He maneuvered through the chaotic crowd with purpose, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. The woman, a known socialite, was clearly beyond help, her life extinguished by an apparent poisoning. Amid the frenzy, the diamond necklace, which had been the center of the evening's excitement, had vanished. Law enforcement arrived swiftly, but Alex had already begun his own quiet investigation. He observed the scene with a critical eye, noting every detail that others might overlook. A spilled glass of champagne, a toppled chair, and the uneasy glances of the guests painted a picture of the night's sudden turn. In the midst of the commotion, Alex noticed a peculiar detail: a handkerchief with an ornate monogram, lying inconspicuously near where the woman had fallen. As police and paramedics took over, Alex was approached by a flustered estate manager, who seemed all too eager to cooperate. "Detective Reed, we're in over our heads. Any help you can provide would be invaluable," he said, his voice tinged with desperation. Alex nodded, pocketing the handkerchief. He knew that the social circle he was dealing with was as intricate and opaque as the diamond that had been stolen. Each guest had their own secrets, and he would need to untangle their stories to uncover the truth. With the auction's end and the evening's glamour overshadowed by tragedy, Alex Reed was left with more questions than answers. The handkerchief was just the beginning. As he looked around at the nervous faces of the guests, he sensed that unraveling this mystery would be anything but simple. The deadly auction had set the stage for a complex and dangerous investigation, and Alex was determined to bring the truth to light. Detective Alex Reed awoke the next morning to a city shrouded in fog. The aftermath of the auction had left him restless, his mind replaying every detail of the previous night. The handkerchief he had found was now laid out on his desk, its elegant monogram a tantalizing clue. As he sipped his coffee, he knew the investigation needed to delve deeper into the world of the Hilton estate and its guests. The first step was to visit the crime scene once more. The estate, now quieter in daylight, seemed almost serene compared to the chaos of the night before. Alex met with Officer Helen Davis, the lead investigator, who was still piecing together the fragments of the case. She greeted him with a nod, her face showing the strain of a long night. "Anything new since I left?" Alex asked, his tone neutral but probing. Helen shook her head. "Not much. The preliminary autopsy confirmed poisoning, but the type hasn't been identified yet. The diamond necklace is still missing, and we haven't found any additional evidence." Alex frowned. "I'd like to review the security footage and interview the staff." The security office was a small, windowless room filled with screens displaying various angles of the estate. Alex watched the footage from the auction with keen interest, noting the movements of guests and staff. The handkerchief, found near the victim, had not been caught on camera, but the footage revealed several interesting interactions. A man in a dark suit, his face partially obscured by shadows, had been seen lingering near the pedestal where the diamond was displayed. Alex noted his presence, but there was no clear identification. The footage also showed a moment of agitation from the estate manager, Robert Easton, just before the victim collapsed. Next, Alex interviewed the staff, starting with the housekeeper, Margaret. Her demeanor was nervous, and she struggled to maintain eye contact. "I just do my job, detective. I didn't see anything unusual," she said, her voice trembling. Alex's questions were methodical, but he sensed that Margaret was hiding something. He promised to follow up with more questions and moved on to other staff members, including the estate's chef and security personnel. Each interview revealed tidbits of information, but nothing concrete. The chef, for example, was defensive about his kitchen practices, while the security team seemed more concerned with covering their own backs than providing useful details. Returning to his office, Alex examined the handkerchief more closely. The monogram, EM, was a clue, but it was common enough that it didn't immediately narrow down the suspects. He decided to visit the estate's guest list and dig into the backgrounds of the attendees. The guest list was a who's who of the city's elite. Among them was Elaine Monroe, a well-known philanthropist and close friend of the victim. Her name, as it turned out, matched the monogram on the handkerchief. Alex made a note to speak with her, curious about her connection to the case. Later that day, Alex visited Elaine Monroe at her grand, yet modestly decorated townhouse. She greeted him with a reserved but polite demeanor. Her house was filled with books and art, a stark contrast to the opulence of the Hilton estate. "Detective Reed, I assume you're here about the auction," Elaine said, her voice calm, but with a hint of sadness. "I'm devastated by what happened. Is there anything I can do to help?" Alex studied her face, looking for any signs of deceit. "I found a handkerchief with your monogram at the crime scene. Do you know how it might have ended up there?" Elaine's eyes widened slightly. "No, I don't. I haven't seen that handkerchief in years. It was a gift from my late husband. I keep it in a drawer, but I haven't used it." Alex's instincts told him she was being truthful, though he could not ignore the possibility of a deeper connection. "I'll need to verify your whereabouts during the auction and possibly speak with others who were close to you and the victim." Elaine nodded, visibly distressed but cooperative. "Of course, detective. Anything to help." As Alex left her townhouse, he felt a growing sense that the case was more intricate than he initially thought. The handkerchief was a key piece, but it was leading him into a web of connections and secrets. The next step would be to unravel these connections and find the missing diamond, if it was indeed related to the murder. Back at his office, Alex began to piece together the profiles of the other guests, looking for links and potential motives. The investigation was just beginning, and the clues were starting to form a more complex picture. The truth was out there, hidden among the facades of the wealthy and influential, and Alex was determined to uncover it. The days following the auction were filled with interviews and research, each moment adding another layer to the intricate puzzle Alex Reed was trying to solve. The initial clues, while promising, had led to more questions than answers. Determined to crack the case, Alex dug deeper into the lives of those connected to the Hilton estate and its recent tragedy. Alex's first stop was to meet with Robert Easton, the estate manager, whose behavior had seemed peculiar on the night of the auction. Robert's office was a testament to understated wealth, with dark wood paneling and a large mahogany desk cluttered with paperwork. The manager himself was a tall, impeccably dressed man, though his air of confidence did little to mask his visible anxiety. "Mr. Easton," Alex began, taking a seat opposite the manager. "I'd like to ask you a few more questions about the auction and the events leading up to the victim's death." Robert nodded, his face a mask of professionalism. "Of course, detective. I'm happy to assist in any way I can." Alex leaned forward, his tone probing. "I noticed you appeared particularly agitated just before the victim collapsed. Can you explain why?" Robert's expression hardened slightly. "I was concerned about the security of the auction items. We had several high-value pieces, and I was just trying to ensure everything was in order." Alex's gaze remained steady. "And did you notice anything unusual, or anyone acting suspiciously?" Robert hesitated, then shook his head. "No, everything seemed normal. But I must admit, the atmosphere was tense. It's a lot of pressure hosting such an event." Next, Alex visited the estate's security team, focusing on the security footage he'd reviewed. Officer Davis had informed him that the security guard on duty, a man named Joe Carr, had been reprimanded recently for lapses in vigilance. Carr was a burly, unshaven man with a gruff exterior, and he met Alex's questions with defensiveness. "I was just doing my job, detective." "I didn't see anything out of the ordinary," Carr said, his eyes shifting nervously. Alex probed further. "What about the staff? Did you notice any unusual interactions between them or with the guests?" Carr's demeanor softened slightly. "Well, now that you mention it, I did see the housekeeper, Margaret, acting strangely. She was moving around the ballroom a lot more than usual, and she seemed flustered." This new lead directed Alex back to Margaret, the housekeeper. He arranged a second interview, this time in a more casual setting at a local cafe. Margaret appeared more at ease, though her nervousness still lingered. I've heard you were seen behaving unusually during the auction, Alex said gently. Can you tell me more about that? Margaret's eyes darted around the cafe, her hands wringing nervously. I was just trying to keep up with the extra workload. There were more guests than expected, and I was running around to make sure everything was in order. Alex pressed on. Did you notice anything suspicious, or anyone who seemed out of place? Margaret shook her head. No, detective. I was too busy to pay much attention. I just know that the victim, Ms. Adler, had been receiving strange phone calls in the days leading up to the auction. She seemed worried. This was a significant development. Alex decided to follow up on this lead by checking with the victim's personal contacts and reviewing her recent communications. Later that day, Alex visited Elaine Monroe's home again, this time with a specific question. He found her in her study, surrounded by books and papers. Elaine looked up with a weary but determined expression. Detective Reed, is there something else you need? She asked. Alex took a deep breath. I've learned that Ms. Adler was receiving threatening phone calls before the auction. Do you know anything about this, or if she mentioned anything to you? Elaine's face paled. Yes, she did mention something, though she didn't go into details. She said she was being threatened by someone she couldn't identify. She was very upset and fearful, but she refused to involve the police at the time. She thought she could handle it herself. Alex's mind raced. The threats could be connected to the murder and the stolen diamond. Do you know if she had any enemies, or if there was anyone who might have wanted to harm her? Elaine considered this for a moment. She was a prominent figure, and made some enemies in the business world. But I can't think of anyone specific who would resort to murder. With this new information, Alex's next step was to explore the possibility that the murder was related to the victim's business dealings. He planned to investigate her recent activities and any potential conflicts she might have had with others. As he left Elaine's townhouse, Alex felt a growing sense of urgency. The threads of the case were coming together, but they were still tangled. The mysterious handkerchief, the threats, and the missing diamond were all part of a larger, more complex narrative. Determined to find clarity, Alex prepared for the next phase of his investigation, knowing that uncovering the truth would require delving into the shadows of the victim's life and the motives of those around her. Detective Alex Reed spent the morning combing through the victim, Rachel Adler's, business dealings. Her firm, Adler Enterprises, was known for its high-profile investments and philanthropic ventures. Alex hoped that exploring her recent activities might reveal motives tied to the murder or the missing diamond. Rachel's office, a sleek modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows, was a stark contrast to the chaotic scene of the auction. Alex met with the firm's CEO, Jonathan Clark. A tall man with a commanding presence and a noticeable air of tension. Mr. Clark, Alex began, I'm looking into Rachel Adler's recent business dealings. I understand her firm was involved in some high-stakes negotiations. Can you provide any details on what she was working on before her death? Jonathan's face tightened. Rachel was deeply involved in several major projects. The most pressing was a merger with a rival firm. It was a contentious deal, and there were a lot of powerful interests at play. Some people were quite unhappy with how things were progressing. Alex noted the potential for conflict. Did Rachel mention any threats or issues related to this deal? Jonathan hesitated. Not to me directly, but she was known to have had heated discussions with some of the other stakeholders. I can provide you with contact information for them if it would help. Please do, Alex said. Any other details about her personal life or recent changes in her behavior might also be useful. Jonathan nodded and handed over a list of names and contact information. As Alex left the office, he felt a new lead emerging from the tangled web of business rivalries. Later, Alex reached out to several of the individuals on the list, setting up interviews with key stakeholders in the merger. He also decided to revisit the estate manager, Robert Easton, to discuss the information he had gathered about the victim's business dealings and any potential connections to the crime. Robert's office was as meticulous as ever. When Alex arrived, Robert looked up from his desk with a hint of apprehension. "Detective Reed, back again?" Robert asked. "Yes," Alex replied. "I've been investigating Rachel Adler's recent business activities. It appears there were some contentious negotiations involving her firm. Do you have any insight into how this might relate to the auction or the murder?" Robert's face betrayed a flicker of unease. "I'm not directly involved in her business affairs, but I do know that the tension was palpable. Rachel had been under a lot of pressure lately, and some people were very vocal about their dissatisfaction." Alex noticed Robert's guarded tone. "Did you notice any interactions or conversations that seemed particularly intense or unusual during the auction?" Robert thought for a moment. There were a few guests who seemed more agitated than others. One in particular was a man named Edward Sinclair. He's a wealthy investor with interests that conflicted with Rachel's. I remember seeing him speaking heatedly with her at the event. Alex made a mental note of Sinclair's name. "Thank you, Mr. Easton. I'll follow up on that lead." With this new information, Alex arranged to meet Edward Sinclair. Sinclair's office was opulent, decorated with expensive art and furnishings. The man himself was impeccably dressed, his demeanor polished, but concealing a smoldering tension. "Mr. Sinclair," Alex said as he entered, "I'd like to talk to you about Rachel Adler and the recent auction." Sinclair raised an eyebrow. "I see. What about her?" "I understand you had some disagreements with Ms. Adler regarding a recent merger," Alex said, watching Sinclair's reaction closely. "Can you tell me more about those disagreements?" Sinclair's eyes narrowed. Rachel was a formidable opponent. She was obstructive and aggressive, particularly when it came to our business interests. I wouldn't say we were friends, but I had no reason to harm her. Alex scrutinized Sinclair's expression. "Did you have any contact with her recently that might have led to a confrontation?" Sinclair's jaw tightened. "We had a few heated discussions, but nothing that would warrant murder. If you're looking for suspects, you might want to consider others with more personal grudges. Alex thanked Sinclair and left the office, pondering the encounter. Sinclair's cool demeanor and dismissive attitude suggested he might be hiding something, but there were no clear signs of guilt. Returning to his office, Alex reviewed his notes and the list of names from Jonathan Clark. He decided to follow up with other key figures involved in the merger, hoping to uncover more about the tensions that might have led to Rachel's death. The investigation was weaving a complex tapestry of motives, secrets, and conflicts. As Alex continued to unravel the threads, he knew that the key to solving the case lay in connecting the dots between Rachel's personal and professional life. With each interview and piece of evidence, he was getting closer to understanding the full extent of the crime and the people involved. As the day ended, Alex felt a sense of determination. The mystery of Rachel Adler's murder and the missing diamond was still unsolved, but he was making progress. He knew that uncovering the truth would require not just examining the evidence, but understanding the hidden relationships and loyalties of those involved. The days following Alex Reed's latest interviews were a whirlwind of activity. The investigation into Rachel Adler's murder had led him down a twisting path of corporate rivalries, personal vendettas, and hidden secrets. As the clues began to converge, Alex felt he was closing in on the truth. The missing diamond was still a mystery, but it was becoming clear that the key to solving Rachel's murder lay in understanding the web of relationships surrounding her. Alex returned to his office one evening, exhausted but resolute. He reviewed his notes and the evidence collected over the past weeks. The handkerchief with the EM monogram had led him to Elaine Monroe, whose connection to Rachel was still unclear but important. The tensions between Rachel and her business rivals, particularly Edward Sinclair, had also played a significant role in the case. The missing diamond, once thought to be the motive, seemed to be a red herring or a diversion. He decided it was time to confront the key players once more. His first stop was Elaine Monroe's townhouse. As he entered, Elaine greeted him with a mix of anxiety and hope. "Detective Reed, what have you found?" she asked. Her voice trembling, Alex took a deep breath. "Elaine, I've been piecing together the details of Rachel's life and the circumstances surrounding her death. There's something you need to know." Elaine's eyes widened. "What is it?" Alex began. Rachel was indeed receiving threats related to her business dealings, but there was more to it. The handkerchief you said you hadn't seen in years was actually a clue leading to a deeper connection. Elaine looked puzzled. "I don't understand." Alex continued. "I discovered that Rachel had been involved in a secretive and contentious deal with a powerful business group. Edward Sinclair was one of the key figures opposing her, but the real breakthrough came when I realized that the threatening calls Rachel received were traced back to someone much closer to her." He paused for effect, then revealed, "The phone records showed that Elaine Monroe's number was used to make those calls. Not directly, but through a series of burner phones linked back to you." Elaine's face turned pale. "No, that can't be." "I wouldn't," Alex cut her off. The evidence points to a deeper motive. Rachel was planning to expose some unethical practices involving your charitable foundation. She was about to reveal how funds were being misused. It seems that in your desperation to protect your reputation and your legacy, you saw Rachel as a threat. Elaine's composure finally cracked. Rachel was a threat to everything I had worked for. She was about to destroy everything. I had to stop her. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was supposed to be just a scare, but when she didn't back down. Alex shook his head. You didn't need to kill her. The diamond was stolen to throw us off the real motive. It was a cover-up. Elaine's shoulders slumped. The diamond is hidden in my safe. I was trying to keep it hidden to distract from my involvement. Alex nodded. Thank you for your honesty. We'll need to get that diamond back and sort everything out. With Elaine's confession, the case began to resolve itself. The missing diamond was recovered, and Elaine Monroe was taken into custody. The truth about the misuse of charitable funds and the threats made against Rachel Adler came to light, leading to further investigations and legal actions against those involved. In the days that followed, Alex reflected on the case. It had been a challenging and intricate investigation, but it had ultimately revealed the complex interplay of personal ambition, fear, and desperation. Rachel Adler's death had uncovered hidden truths about the people in her world, and justice would be served. As Alex prepared to move on to his next case, he felt a sense of closure. The mystery of the auction and the murder had been solved, but the ripple effects of the investigation would continue to shape the lives of those involved. For now, Alex was content to have brought the truth to light and to have restored some measure of justice. He left his office, stepping into the bustling city, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The world of high society and its hidden intrigues had proven to be as intricate as any puzzle, but Alex Reed was determined to face each challenge with the same unwavering resolve. Thank you for subscribing to our channel. You are awesome.